unto itself. So I'm going to be going back and forth to video clips, and I'm probably not going to get to everything that I had prepared. But what I would say is, if anyone here, I know I did get an email earlier that there's somebody who is an opera singer in Germany, I believe, who is going to be here. So if there's anyone here who has anything to add, or I'll be honest, if I say something you disagree with, because like I said, I'm not an expert per se on this, please feel free to send something in the chat or raise your hand, and I'd be happy to have you share, because I feel as a teacher, I am also just as much a learner. And so there's a good chance I'll learn some things that I don't even know, because this is such a broad topic. So as I was preparing for it, I was like, oh, what did I get myself into? This really should be a course. But in Yiddish, we'd say it's a Vorspeise. It's a little taste. It's an appetizer. But it's not, it's in no way, shape, or form going to be in 1.5 hours. It's not going to be a detailed exploration of Judaism and opera. So if you don't know where I am at least theoretically in the Metropolitan Opera. There's Hazan Leah Frey Rabin. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, just chatted with me, and she is, as I said, a Chazan, a cantor, as well as an opera singer, as well as a friend of Armin Langer, our student rabbi. So I'm just going to start before opera, because I think it's important to know sort of what came first in the Jewish world. Operas, and I'm just going to give a little teeny introduction to the history of opera, because that's even more complex, but just to get a sense of timing. And I apologize if it looks like I'm looking away. I have 2 screens going here, actually 3, because I've got 2 on this and 1 on here. So opera really originated as we know it today in the late 16th century, the late 16th century. And so in Italy, and Italy was really the center of the operatic world. The most prominent composers came from Italy, except for those who came from France. And as we'll see, in terms of Jewish opera, it actually really was, it was really French. But so we had, people like the first opera, which I had actually never heard of, Jacopo Peri's mostly lost opera, Daphne, was in 1598, and then people whose names are at least a little more well-known, Claudio Monteverdi, Heinrich Schütz in Germany, Jean-Baptiste Lully. I'm terrible at pronouncing some of these names, so I apologize. Jean-Baptiste Lully in France, and Henry Purcell, or Purcell, depending on who you talk to, in England, really developed in the 17th century different styles of opera that were more national. They were, the French, and even to this day, a French opera, an Italian opera, a German opera, an English opera, an American opera, they all have a certain different sensibility to them, which again, if we were talking about opera per se, we could go into that. But just to say, during the 17th century, that's really when that started to grow. And by the 18th century, which is where we really see things flourishing, again, Italy really dominated the operatic world, except for France, because there's this idea of I think French opera seeing itself as, or the French historically sort of seeing themselves, I don't want to cast any aspersions on the French, but as separate from other parts of Europe in certain ways, maybe perhaps superior, but I don't want to get into that per se. So in 18th century, operas really flourished, especially in Italy, but then also in France. And the main form was opera seria, which is really sort of a serious melodramatic type of opera, somewhat artificial in its presentation from what I understand, those who have tried to mimic what they think it was like back then. But then Gluck in the 18th century really tried to shift things. And then Mozart came along in the 18th century and just blew everything out of the water in his own unique form. If anybody's ever seen Amadeus, even though that is a fictionalized story of Mozart, it gives you the sense that he came in and just nobody knew what to do with him, because he was doing things with music, with plot, that nobody had ever done before. And he really advanced not only serious opera, but also comic operas, such as La Nozze di Figaro or Magic Flute. And then things continued to grow. And then the bel canto era was the 19th century with Rossini, Donizetti, Bellini. And that was really also when grand opera came about too. These sort of, as one of the articles I read, sort of the Steven Spielberg operas, like let's do it as big as we can, 4 acts, 5 acts, 200 people in the chorus. I might be exaggerating there, but let's make it as grand as possible. But Jews, while this is all happening, Jews are not really part of society earlier on. Obviously, by the time we get to the 18th, 19th century, things are shifting. So that's what's going on in the general world from the late 16th century through the 18th century and then into the 19th century. But let's go back to the 16th, early 17th century, okay, when opera is in its nascent phase. In the Jewish world, there was really only, and I won't say there was only one composer, but there's one composer that really signified, that's a real, I can't think of the, I hate, and when I'm on Zoom, my vocabulary just sort of disappears.
Typifies? Typifies?
Thank you. Liz, what would I do without you? What was going on in the Jewish world, which is Salomone Rossi, who was writing for the non-Jewish world. He was actually, so this is pre-emancipation, emancipation being at the end of the 17th century, 18th century with the French Revolution. So there were Jews, and he's the prime example that typifies composers who were able to sort of alternate between the Jewish and non-Jewish world because they were just so good. So Salomone Rossi, who lived 1570 to 1630 in Mantua, Italy, he was a court composer. He was a violinist, evidently an expert violinist. And he was even, in those days, Jews had to wear a yellow badge, not a yellow star. And he was excused from that by the Duke by the court in Mantua. And he was writing for the general public and performing for the general public while also writing liturgical music. But his liturgical music really bore no relationship to what was considered traditional Jewish liturgical music, and even the text. I mean, he wrote a piece called the Song of Solomon, which you would think was from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which in Christian Bibles is usually translated as a Song of Solomon. It was a Jewish text. It had nothing to do, not a single word of it was from Shir HaShirim. The assumption is it was a play on words, the Song of Solomon, and his name was Solomon. So I want to give you a little, so this is pre-opera. So I wanted to give you a little taste of Rossi. Just want to make sure I'm doing
There are
this
3
right.
simple changes. I tell all.
Oh, I'm trying to, hold on. I'm not going to show it to you until we get past the commercials. There we go. And so there are a lot of clips of Salomone Rossi's music on YouTube and elsewhere. And I thought, well, why not take the melody that we know, the prayer that we know can take on so many different melodies, Adon Olam. Hold on one second here. No, don't do that. Sorry. All right, one second here. Share screen. Okay, so this is Salomone Rossi's Adon Olam. Again, I don't know exactly when this was written. But as I said, he lived 1570 to 1630. So we're assuming this is late 16th, early 17th century. So let's hope this works.
It didn't share yet.
Okay. Hold on. Sorry about that. I don't know why it didn't share. Oh, I didn't choose which screen to share. Sorry, that was my bad. Now can you see it?
Yeah, we see your full desktop.
I know. I've got to change that.
There you go.
All right. There we go.
Sound isn't coming through though, Steve.
I had checked off. That's weird. Okay,
Just
hold
do
on.
new share and make sure it's selected.
Okay, let me do it again because I did select it, but I did select it before. So let me see. Share. Oh, okay. It went. I thought it saved when I changed it from earlier, but it didn't. You know, I've only been doing this stuff on Zoom for how many years now? It seems like forever. You'd think okay, so now, all right. Now, sorry, I've got to get back to it. I apologize for this, but all right, no, it's not showing. Hold on, I can't find it. Once I get this.
It's the joys of Zoom.
Yeah, it is. I know. I'm sure we're all sick of it and used to it at the same time. All right, so now let me try this. Why is it only giving me option to share my entire desktop? Oh no, there we go. But now I've got to share sound again. Now can you see it?
Yes.
All right, now let's hope you can hear it. Let me go back to the beginning. Liz, you'll let me know.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Oh, wait. Sorry, I'm trying to stop it now. Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So, again, we're used to Jewish liturgical music mostly from the Ashkenazi world, from Europe. This doesn't sound like what we consider certainly liturgical music, but even, you know, from what I understand from historians, it was very different from liturgical music of the time. It bore much more resemblance to the madrigals and the other types of music that were popular in those days, which is what he was writing outside of the Jewish world. So that just gives us a little taste. And actually, so he had a sister who was probably the first officially engaged Jewish opera singer in the early days of opera. And I don't think this was her given name at birth. She was known as Madama Europa. I just love that name. I would love to talk to her and say, okay, where did you come up with that name? So, so that was really the early, again, that was the early days of opera. And she was, again, she was also engaged officially by the court in Mantua to perform opera. So they were really ahead of their time. There were other Jews who were involved in the operatic world. One of the most famous ones who actually converted to Christianity is Lorenzo da Ponte in Vienna. And as some of you who are opera fans would know, he wrote the librettos for 3 of Mozart's operas. But again, he was born Jewish, but he made the choice to convert, which then gave him many more access in those days. So following the French Revolution, again, at the end of the 18th century, things really opened up. And Jews were allowed to participate in society, especially in France. And then that sort of spread to the rest of Europe as well. And Liz, you'll keep an eye on the chat, because if anybody says something and I miss it, you can let me know, because I'm looking at 3 different things as it is. So it's a little tricky. So, oh, and I've got an extra screen open. I can get rid of that one. That's good. All right. So things really opened up. So Paris in the 1800s really became the center of the musical world, even though, as I said, opera had been really advancing in Italy so much, but it was really in France that things opened up in general to society. And so it's not surprising that, I mean, there were Jews in Italy, certainly. Salomone Rossi was there. There was a thriving Jewish community. There were thriving Jewish communities that were ghettoized. Actually, for those who don't know, the term ghetto comes from Italian. It was to refer to the Jewish enclaves. That's a polite word to use, in Venice and other Italian cities. So if we go to Paris in the 1800s, that really became the center of the musical world. And if you really wanted to make it big at that point, you needed to, if you could make it there, you'd make it anywhere. New York certainly was not that. Paris was. There were 5 opera houses in Paris. So surprisingly, very quickly, the Jews kind of, I won't say took over, but we had 2, and then actually 3 over the next century, but right at the beginning, 2 very prominent Jewish composers. The first one is, and again, I apologize for my pronunciations, Giacomo Meyerbeer, who was one of the most prolific composers of grand operas. Visual spectacles, again, in some of the articles I read, he was likened to either Cecil B. DeMille or Steven Spielberg or others. They were epic. And so this started with his, and in the operatic world, in the 1800s, he was really considered, almost like Beethoven was in the general classical world, starting with Robert le Diable in 1831. Just as a little aside, when Wagner came to France, who we know was not a big fan of Jews, and that's putting it mildly, Meyerbeer actually helped him introduced him to people in France. I think, I'm assuming, not knowing how anti-Semitic he was at that time. And Wagner evidently never forgave him for the fact that he was a Jew who helped him. But we're not going to talk about Wagner and the Jews. So again, most of his operas, though, are not performed today. You'll see arias from Meyerbeer performed in different albums, recordings by different opera singers, but you don't really find Meyerbeer. It's like I'm moving my mouse trying to figure out why is nothing happening on my screen, and realizing, oh, I'm using the mouse on my second computer. That's why. All right, so I wanted to give you a little taste of Meyerbeer. So this is not he didn't write about Jewish themes at all. One of the few operas that does get performed by him, one of the few operas of his that does get, I do speak English, by the way, that does get performed is Les Huguenots, the Huguenots, again, which is about, it is about religious tolerance and intolerance, and but Christian religious tolerance and intolerance. And I have a little clip of perhaps one of the greatest opera singers of the 20th century, who was known simply by the public as La Stupenda. Somebody want to put in the chat, who is La Stupenda? Who was La Stupenda? The stupendous one. Somebody want to put in the chat who knows who La Stupenda was? Do you know? No, not me.
No, Corey.
Joan Sutherland. So somebody did say Sutherland. So she had a unique voice that she could sing so many different genres, so many different, and yeah, I mean, she really, well, we won't get into talking about voice because that's a whole another course, but she had a unique voice that she was able to sing different types of opera that often were meant or usually thought to be for different types of sopranos. So, you know, she could, for those who are opera lovers, you know that, you know, she could, you know, her Norma, as much as her La Traviata, as, you know, different, again, different types. So this is her her performing in a little bit of Les Huguenots, just to see a little bit of what the style was. And this was actually her farewell performance in Australia. She was Australian from the 1970s, I think. But I'm going to now try and, so again, this is Meyerbeer, Jewish composer, but not Jewish themes in any weird way. So we'll see sort of the transition here. Okay, I'm going to mute myself. So that was just a little clip. Again, there's nothing Jewish about that, though. It was about religious tolerance or intolerance, the wars between the Huguenots and the Catholics in France. And it was, as I said, he was the in some ways the pinnacle of grand opera. Again, 5 acts, very elaborate, very ornate, solos galore for the different. There are three sopranos. So it was definitely not, as I said, he was Cecil B. DeMille. He was, well, maybe Spielberg isn't exactly right, because Spielberg can be subtle. I don't think DeMille ever could be. So there we see Jews getting into the operatic world. And again, he was 1791 to 1864. At the same time, Fromental Halevi, also French, was another composer of the grandest of grand operas. And again, he had his most famous opera, the one that still gets performed, though not as frequent as certain other operas today, is La Juive, which means the Jew. So here we have the first Jewish composer composing an opera with Jewish themes. It gets pretty complicated, but basically Elazar is a goldsmith. He has a daughter, Rochelle, who Elazar is going to be executed because he's seen working on a Christian holy day. He gets saved. The prince or the duke, I forget what he is now, who's married, disguises himself as a Christian, falls in love with Rochelle. They're going to run off together. They find out that he's not Jewish. And it goes on and on and on from there. In the end, Rochelle gets executed because it was illegal for Christians and Jews to marry.
The chat is translating for us that it translates to the Jewess, referring to Eleazar's daughter.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So yeah, I mean, Jewess that term is sort of out of, I mean, we don't use it anymore, but it certainly was the term that was used for a Christian Jew. So La Juive, I guess, is the Jewess, right? Thank you. I just realized that I mistranslated. Thank you, Eugene, because it would have been Le Juif as opposed to La Juive, which is the Jewish woman. So again, French being a gendered language, which has its problems, at least when you see, traditionally, when you see the name, you could know what they're talking about. So the main character is Rochelle, around who the opera revolves, but it is primarily seen as a tenor tour de force, just to give you a little bit of the history. So again, this is the one opera that Halevi is really remembered for. It was premiered in 1835. Again, this sort of grand opera tradition, 5 acts in Paris. There was always been some discussion, I think there still is today, was it trying to promote religious tolerance by saying that, pointing out that the Jewish woman, well, she got executed. I'm sorry, I can't remember now if he's a prince. If anybody here knows exactly what his royal position was, remind me, who pretended to be Jewish and he got exiled, but Rochelle was executed. And it ends with her father, Elazar, mourning over her as she's brutally executed. So was it trying to teach about religious tolerance? Other people say, well, no, because there were sort of Jewish stereotypes in the portrayal of Elazar. He was a goldsmith, he was cunning, he was materialistic. So there's still, I think, my sense is that there's still among opera scholars some disagreements about that. But it was considered a hugely successful opera at the time, which is interesting because it has such Jewish themes. In 1844, it premiered in the United States. Again, at 1835, at the Opéra Paris. So again, we're talking about one of the main opera houses. 1844 in the New Orleans Opera, which was one of the great opera houses in America. 1875, it opened, it inaugurated a new opera house, the Palais Garnier in Paris, and then finally came to the Metropolitan Opera in 1885. Not heard from again at the Met until 1919, when the Met revived it specifically for and at the request of the greatest tenor of his day, and to some, the greatest tenor of all time, certainly the first super tenor, because of his recordings in the early days of recorded music. Who is that tenor? The first of the great tenors that we, well, at least that we have record of. Anybody want to take a guess? I know some of you know. Caruso, right? Enrico Caruso. So it was revived for him in 1919. He made recordings of some of the arias, one in particular, which I will play in a minute. And then we jump ahead about 40 years. The first Jewish tenor to make this role his own and really claim it as a Jew portraying a Jewish role created by a Jewish composer. Anybody know? Perhaps, yeah, no, not Jan Pierce, his brother-in-law. Richard Tucker, right. Reuven Ticker, to be exact. So that could be another class talking about Richard Tucker and Jan Pierce, brothers-in-law, who unfortunately had a long-standing feud with each other. Jan Pierce was one of the top tenors at the Met. Pierce did it too, you're right. Thank you. So Pierce, Jan Pierce was one of the top tenors at the Met. And he, to make a long story short, in some people's mind, what happened was Richard Tucker eclipsed him in the public's mind. I don't know if their relatives who are still alive today question exactly, but whether it was jealousy, but some say that there was actually an early, yes, Tucker was married to Pierce's sister. Somebody asked about being brother-in-law. So whatever, they were two of the great tenors of the time. It's interesting, this is just a personal note, if you listen to Pierce and Tucker, they have very similar voices, timbres, etc. But there's something about, in terms of, in my point of view, Tucker was just a cut above. Not to in any way cast any aspersions on Pierce. Pierce was an amazing tenor as well. But so they were both, you're right, the first Jews to really claim this role. And then if we go into the 1970s, Tucker unfortunately died very young of a heart attack. The only person to ever, for his funeral, to ever be on the stage, from the stage of the Metropolitan Opera, Richard Tucker. And if you go to the Met, if you go to Lincoln Center, there's a little square in the middle of the road there, a little triangle in the middle of where Broadway and Amsterdam and I forget exactly which cross streets, and you'll see a bust of Richard Tucker. That's Richard Tucker Square. So not only was he an amazing tenor, but he died at a very young age of a heart attack. So I wanted to share, because I feel like this is, even though it doesn't get performed that often anymore, until it seems to be, my sense is, and from what I can read, when there's a tenor who comes along who really wants to do it, Tucker and Pierce, and then in the 70s, Neil Shikoff, who was a wonderful tenor, he, and Jewish, and he really made the role of Elazar his own. So I want to play a little audio clip of Tucker, so just you get a sense of his voice. And the other piece of it, so Tucker was actually discovered, he was a cantor, he was a chazan, that was his primary occupation. In New York and New Jersey, he was well known as one of the top chazanim, top cantors in the world, until he had auditioned for the Met and got turned down, and eventually, it's a longer story, he was brought back and he did perform at the Met and then took the world by storm. But he never stopped being a chazan. He continued to serve as a chazan on the high holidays in various locations. Pierce Jan Pierce, his brother-in-law, did record a lot of cantorial music, but as far as I know, as far as I can tell, he actually never served as a chazan. After he graduated from Columbia, he really went the route of becoming an opera singer. So in some ways, Tucker kind of fell into it. And I was going to share some of his cantorial recordings, but I don't think we have time to do that if we do at the end. But if not, if you go onto YouTube, you can hear Richard Tucker's cantorial recordings, as well as Jan Pierce's and others. So Tucker really kind of fell into it, but was still, as I said, he still served as a chazan. And I couldn't find this, and I don't know if this is apocryphal or true, and maybe somebody out there does know this, that the urban legend is he did perform on Shabbat, but there were certain things that he would not do on Shabbat in terms of getting paid on Shabbat. But again, I'm not totally sure what the reality, but he did remain, they both remained very committed Jews, but Tucker did remain a chazan. I can only imagine what it must have been like to be sitting in one of those congregations. Chazan Leah raised her hand. So let me see. If you have something to add, you want to unmute yourself for a second?
Yeah, Richard Tucker did sing on Shabbat. He sang many a Saturday afternoon broadcast.
Right.
But I don't know, I knew him and was it's an interesting story. I visited them when I was in the Met auditions in the finals in 1971. I sat there in their living room and was saying, well, why are you going? I was already going off to Germany. Why are you going there and you're going to sing, why are you singing that music? I sang Die Teure Halle, Tannhäuser, for the finals. Why are you singing music of that composer? And I didn't know at the time that he'd made a wonderful recording of Meistersinger, the Preislied, the prize song. Absolutely brilliant recording. So I really wish I'd have known that at that time.
So you felt that he was questioning or criticizing you because you were going to Germany and singing Wagner, the rabid anti-Semite music, where
Right.
he had actually recorded
but
it.
he did it in a very amusing. He was teasing me actually, and he said, "No, so Gegenunterricht, okay."
He never
Unfortunately,
performed it. Did he ever perform Wagner? I don't think so.
I don't think so, but I know from other friends that he was really considering doing Walter von Stolzing. He would have been a wonderful, wonderful Lohengrin and Tannhäuser.
Yo, he certainly had the voice for it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And he would have been an absolutely glorious Siegmund.
Yeah, you're right. But it's interesting that, again, a whole other course, Wagner and operas and the Jews. I mean, as it took me, I would never listen to Wagner when I first got into opera until my ex-partner, whose father escaped from Germany with one of the last kinder transports, finally introduced me to the glories of Wagner. And so now I can just separate the man from the opera. But as a rabbi, I will not allow Here Comes the Bride to be played at any wedding at which I officiate, because that's Wagner.
I wouldn't want it anyway. Look what happened to Elsa, for heaven's sake.
That's true. That's true. She didn't have a happy ending.
No.
But the interesting thing is, in my 30 years of doing weddings, give or take, the response of most couples is, oh, wouldn't want that anyway. It's very old fashioned. They'd rather something more modern, or Pachelbel's canon, which isn't exactly modern, but different types of music. Only one couple that I worked with actually decided not to have me do their wedding because the bride was so set on Here Comes the Bride. And I said, that's the one thing that I just, one of the two things that I won't do in a wedding, even in an interfaith wedding, which I do perform. The other is directly mentioning Jesus in the wedding. I'll allow, if there's a reading from the Christian tradition, that's fine, as long as it doesn't mention Jesus specifically. So those are the two things that are hard and fast for me. But anyway, going back, so thank you for sharing that. So I remember when I was a kid, my mother, Aleh Shalom, had, and because she was the one who bought the musical albums, there was like a 3 or 4 album set, was Richard Tucker in memoriam. And so it was all of his great operatic roles. And then one of the albums, or at least one of the sides of the albums, I think was all liturgical music. And actually that's where I learned to chant Kol Nidre, was listening to him, his Kol Nidre, and saying, okay, he's a tenor, I'm a baritone, he can sing that, I can't sing that, I have to make it simpler. But his was the basis of me learning Kol Nidre, was listening to Richard Tucker. So I urge you all, we probably won't have time to listen to it, but if you don't have it, go to Spotify, go to YouTube and listen to Richard Tucker's Kol Nidre. So now I want to go back to, I want a second here. I want us to listen to a little bit of Tucker's recording of from La Juive. I'm not even going to take this. I'm going to try, and I might butcher this, Rochelle Comme du Seigneur, and that's the closest I can get to it. So I'm going to play a little bit of Tucker, and then I'm going to switch to a video, and I think we'll watch the whole video clip of Neil Shikoff, because I think it's just important to see, this is really one of the central, again, one of the few operas written by a Jew about Jews, and in this case, sung by a Jew. So I am going to hold on a second. I'm gonna go back to share screen. Okay, you can see that? All right, let me make sure. Oh, I forgot to check and see if it still has the settings right. Let me just see, hold on a sec. Yeah, it does. Okay, it did save the settings. All right, good. All right, so now I'm going to, here's the full version with Neil Shikoff. So that wasn't the entire version, but enough of it. And I couldn't find a video, strangely enough, with the English translation. I've been trying, and I was trying to find it online as well. So if there's someone here who does understand the French and wants to give a quick, oh, you can't give a full translation, but paraphrasing of what was just sung. Anybody here who'd be willing to do that? Okay, well, figured I'd ask because I know there's some people here who might know. All right. Oh, where'd my notes go over here? Sorry. Okay. So that again premiered in 1835. Now, another person who in the 1800s, who was Jewish, who was very prominent, was Jacques Offenbach. He was considered the father of operetta. Though he didn't only write operetta, but again, operetta was much lighter, comic, sort of very similar to Commedia dell'arte, just sort of, farcical and fun. and fun music. Now, the interesting thing is in looking at his operettas, most of them are not, La Pericole does get performed periodically, but there's a melody that comes from his Orpheus in the Underworld, as it's usually translated, that has really become part of popular culture. In Judaism, we have what are called Misinai tunes, which means from Sinai. Those are tunes, melodies that are part of our liturgy that have become so ingrained in us that we think they've always existed, that they came down from Sinai. And yet they were not. They were written by somebody. The Kiddush that we used on Friday night, wait, shoot, is that Seltzer? Our resident Chazan Leah, hopefully you can just give me a little in the chat. I think the Friday night Kiddush is Seltzer.
I think it is, but I use Nusach, so I'm a student of Jack Kessler, so
okay, gotcha. Okay.
Jack wouldn't have anything but Nusach.
Okay, but also there were a lot of melodies that were written by Shlomo Carlebach in the 20th century that people think of, Esa Einai, other things. I remember when I was a kid, the melody that we think of today as always existing, Oh Hoseh Shalom Bimromav. I remember when that was first introduced in my synagogue in the 60s. So it existed prior to that, and I'm not even sure who composed that, but in everybody's mind in America, or at least in American non-Orthodox Jewry, I don't know about Orthodox Jewry, like that's the Oseh Shalom, even though others have been written, Debbie Friedman and others, Craig Taubman, but there are the melodies that, Vish, Amru, all of those are Misinai melodies for us in America, at least, because we think they've always been there. Eugene, you have your hand up. What would you like to add? Just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Oseh Shalom that you just sang was introduced. It doesn't exist anymore, but there used to be something for many years called the Hasidic Song Festival.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
And the Oseh Shalom that you went was in the first Hasidic Song Festival. It wasn't called.
That was in the 60s, right?
Yes, it was in the 60s.
I totally forgot about the Hasidic Song Festival. Thank you for that. So again, we think, wait, I just had a little comment here. Usual progression. Oi, we've never done, this is from Chazan Leah. The usual progression. Oi, we've never done that. Let's sing it. 3, we've always done it. 4, it's Misinai. And that's true. So the reason I brought this up is there is a tune that Offenbach composed for his not so often composed, that was not meant to be a pun there, Orpheus in the Underworld, that people think has always been there. So if I say the word can to you, now I realize you can also, when I say can, for those of you who are Cole Porter fans, you might also think of that. But there's a melody that comes to mind when you hear the term can. And it was not always around. It wasn't a natural part of, can music. It was a type of dance of entertainment, but the melody that we think of as the can actually came from Offenbach's operetta Orpheus in the Underworld in 1858. So I'm going to play a little clip for that, which actually I love this because it is, hold on a second, it is performed by the Venus Orchestra, which I don't know a lot about. Hold on a second.
Featherless, two-legged, linguistically conscious creature born.
Okay, skip ad. All right. So the Venus Orchestra is an all-female orchestra, and they have a lot of fun with this. So I wanted to share their little recording of the can from 1858, from Offenbach's Orpheus in the Underworld. Or what's the exact French? Orphée aux enfers. Again, I'm trying my best with my French. I used to speak a little bit, but my apologies when I mess up. Okay. So can you see that? All right. So that was a lot of fun, and I love the costumes, and I just have to say, like, oh, sorry.
You started with a K-pop dance tutorial, and now you're a Blackpink.
Okay. Although I have to say, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's really cool, and then I was like, oh, they have a male conductor. So just I have to look into the history of the Venus Orchestra because I don't know much about them. But I just found that, and I just thought it was too much fun not to play. And actually, Offenbach to me is, we have Halevi and Meyerbeer, who are both these grand dramatic operas, and Offenbach to me is fun. Now, again, when we're talking about Jewish opera, there's nothing specifically, with the exception of La Juive, there's nothing specifically Jewish about them. Even musically, and you could go into the whole conversation of what is Jewish music and what does that even mean, in terms of, somebody will say, oh, well, it's all in a minor key. Well, that's not really true. But there isn't anything that jumps out as like saying, oh, except I would say there's something to me in the aria from La Juive, there's sort of a plaintiveness that makes me think of some of the traditional Ashkenazi Jewish music. And again, later on, you find things jumping ahead to Gershwin, to Porgy and Bess with, can anybody, I'm jumping ahead here. It ain't necessarily so. Anybody want to know, anybody take a guess of what liturgical piece of music, Eugene?
Yeah, it's very obvious. Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Exactly. And when the first time I heard that, it's like my V8 reaction. Oh, I should have known that. And there are other pieces in sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry.
So, when you look at Gershwin and some of the 20th century composers, you do find more traditional Jewish, what we know as Eastern European Jewish themes. We're talking about, Gershwin, certainly, Kurt Weill, not some of the others, but we will get into, I'm just looking, oh, shoot, we only have like 20 minutes left. Okay, so all right. I'm just going to talk a little bit here, and then I'm just going to show a few clips because I feel like there's so much that we could get into here. So again, there's not necessarily anything that makes it a Jewish opera outside of, well, there are different things. Like it could be theme, it can be musically, certainly the composer, but there's no one standard thing that says, oh, that makes this a Jewish opera. But certainly La Juive. And then we have some, we had oratorios in the 18th century that had biblical themes. Esther, Israel in Egypt, Judas Maccabeus, Handel, and Elijah, which is written by Mendelssohn in the 19th century. One thing I do want to show a clip of is, so the first, one of the early operas that had somewhat Jewish theme, but definitely Jewish characters was Nabucco. Nabucco is the Italian for Nebuchadnezzar. So it's about the Babylonian exile, and it's a romantic story that takes place within the Babylonian exile and the relationships between the Jews and the non-Jews. But one of the most famous pieces of opera that is sung all by Jews is where is it? The chorus Va Pensiere, which is the Jews bemoaning their ancient homeland in Israel, and that I feel that's a clip that we have to show here. So hold on, but there are other operas that have biblical themes and Jewish characters. Samson and Delilah, Samson and Delilah by Samson. Nabucco, Rossini wrote Moses and Egitto, Moses in Egypt. In the 19th century, there was a opera called The Maccabees by Anton Rubinstein, Russian, I think. And then in the 20th century, we have Moses und Aaron, the Moses and Aaron by the German, then American, after he escaped, Arnold Schoenberg. But there's also an opera based on Esther, written by a composer named Meyerowitz in the USA. Again, I don't know if those are ever performed, but Samson and Delilah, Moses and Aaron, Nabucco definitely are ones that are all still performed and have Jewish sensibility, Jewish characters. The only Jewish composer there being Schoenberg, Moses and Aaron. So this is what is called usually referred to as the Hebrew slaves chorus of Va Pensiere. It's the Jews, the Hebrew slaves, the exiles bemoaning their loss of their homeland. Okay, 1 second. So I saw we have a couple of hands raised in a second. So that again, so it's the Jews singing about their loss, and it's very much at least some of the language is definitely taken from either Jeremiah or Eicha, Lamentations, which both speak of the exile, and I'm pretty sure that was recorded at the Metropolitan Opera. And the one thing about, and you can see this in I love the camera work here, and I always feel this way, you always hear this about the Metropolitan Opera chorus, and I always sit way way up to actually see their faces, so that's why I love seeing it in HD or on TV. I mean, each one of those singers is a character. You can see it in their faces. They're not just up there singing it. You know, each of them, I bet you if you asked them, they had a backstory to their character. They knew they were, yes, Psalm 137 paraphrase as well, thank you. It's, you know, it just, that's one of the things that's, I mean, the Met chorus is known for being, I mean, each one of them is an incredible singer and could probably have a solo career in some way, shape, or form. Same with the orchestra. But, you know, you can see that they each feel what they're singing. There were a couple hands that were up. Are they still up? I can't tell.
Hazan Leah?
There is a wonderful opera on Jewish themes by a Jewish composer, Mstislav Weinberg, The Passenger in English. It was written, I think, in the late 60s, and it's being performed now all over. We did it in Frankfurt about 3-4 years ago.
Somehow I missed that one, but thank you.
It takes place on 2 levels. It's flashbacks to Auschwitz. And it's a woman and her husband who are on a trip. They're going away from Germany after the end of the war to South America where they'll be safe. She was an overseer at Auschwitz, and she's haunted by the memories of the terrible things that she did. It's really a shattering opera to see. A couple of my students were in it, so I got very familiar with it.
Thank you for, it's interesting because I've been, you know, I don't rely totally on Wikipedia. I look at other things as well, but the lists of Jewish operas 20th century, I did, at least the 2 or 3 that I looked at, I did not find it, which is, well, it's not, yeah, Weinberg, so it's interesting. So I don't know why it didn't show up, but thank you.
In Russia,
Yeah.
But it's in several different languages. As a matter of fact, you have to kind of, it goes from Russian to German to Yiddish. It's absolutely wonderful. The music is fantastic. It's well worth getting acquainted with.
Okay, thank you so much. Do you know if there's a recording of the full opera? I can research that.
I don't know, and I don't know if Frankfurt put out a DVD. I can find out.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I know you have my email address, so that would be great if it is.
I'll see if I can find something.
All right, thank you. So oops, sorry, wait, went back, go away, sorry. As I thought would happen, we really have only just touched on the issue of Jews and opera. And, you know, we could do one, I touched a little bit on Jewish singers, but certainly there are plenty more. Beverly Sills, Roberta Peters, Robert Merrill, in addition to Tucker and Pierce, and Reza Stevens, and contemporary ones as well. So many Jewish singers. I had one clip that I was going to show, which is I called the Jewish Rigoletto. It was Robert Merrill, Richard Tucker, Risa Stevens, and Roberta Peters, all four Jews. But what I wanted to do to sort of end up, because I didn't really get to go into contemporary operas, 20th century, 20th, 21st, oh, 20th. You know, we have all these composers, Kurt Weill, who, along with Bertolt Brecht, wrote both musical theater and operas. Threepenny Opera, the most commonly performed of his, actually in the operatic world, including the Met, is The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni. Gershwin, Porgy and Bess, he considered to be a folk opera. The Met first performed it in 1984, 85. I remember being there, incredible production. There's a new one now that's also really wonderful. But it also, it's complicated because you have an opera about the African-American experience written by the music by white Jews, the libretto by a Southern white man, and yet trying to portray the African-American experience. And if you talk to African-American singers, it's really interesting because on the one hand, at a time when African-American singers had a hard time getting roles, or harder than today, even the fact that Gershwin made it specific that only Black singers may perform in Porgy and Bess, cannot be white people in blackface. So it gave them work. On the other hand, it sometimes pigeonholed African-American singers into that was the opera they could sing. Certainly that, started to change with Marian Anderson and Leontine Price and others, but there's still that controversy around sort of that love-hate relationship with Porgy and Bess. Schoenberg developed a whole other form of music, which many people call atonal. He didn't like that term. The 12-tone sort of non-harmonic, very different. I can't get into the whole differences. And Philip Glass, sort of one of the fathers of the minimalist style of composing, where there's a lot of sort of repetition. And again, that's an oversimplification and does not do him justice. So what I thought maybe I would do is I have a little. And then there was even an opera written about based on the Dyer of Anne Frank. It was a one-act opera that does get performed periodically. I forgot. I can't find the name of the composer on that, so I apologize. But I have a few little clips here, and then also Andre Previn in later years. Got into opera writing as well, and he chose nothing, he didn't choose easy material, and there, the jury is, there are differing opinions on the quality, but it was Streetcar Named Desire was what he composed. So I have some clips here, which altogether take about 10 minutes. It's a trailer from a film version of Moses und Aaron by Schoenberg. There's a clip of the Alabama song from The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni, which others might know because the Doors recorded it, Bette Midler recorded it. So it's sort of, again, it's in the operatic world, but also done in sort of as musical theater and as entered the popular culture. In this case, it's being sung by Audra McDonald, who is most well known for her work on Broadway, but she was trained as an opera singer. Then we have a clip from Akhenaten by Philip Glass, which is quite an amazing opera about ancient Egypt. And then a little excerpt from Porgy and Bess from this past year's production. And then ending with Renee Fleming giving in the world premiere of Previn's Streetcar Named Desire in 2006 in San Francisco. So I thought it might be nice to end with that, just to give a little taste of Jewish opera in the 20th century. So there's another Anne Frank opera being written now. Okay, that I didn't know about. That, but the one that's been performed now, I know I have the name of the composer down here somewhere. Does anybody know offhand the current one-act opera? Okay, well, I'll look for it while we're listening. So I'm just gonna put this playlist on of these clips. Like I said, it should take about 10 minutes, so that takes us a little past our time. If people can stay, that's great. If you can't, thank you for attending. Liz, do you want to say anything before, because we can sort of go out with this. So is there anything that you want to say before we do that, in case people do have to sign off?
Would you be willing to share the playlist that you're playing everything off of in that link? I can put it in the follow-up email.
Yes, I will. I'll put it all together in one playlist. Perfect. And then have a couple different ones, and then I'll share it with you.
And there'll be a follow-up email with a recording link off of YouTube. And thank you everyone for being here. Okay, thank you everybody. And thank you those of you who corrected me and added to, and I realized I said, I mispronounced Pensiero, I think, before we played it. But anyway, so again, this is a little clip of a film version of Moses and Aaron, Audra McDonald singing the Alabama song from Kurt Weill's Mahagoni, Akhenaten by Philip Glass, Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, and Andre Previn's Streetcar Named Desire. So I think there's a way to, okay, hold on a second. I'm going to pause. I'm going to mute myself.
Fight back with Lip Clear Lysine Plus. Lip Clear is America's top-selling herbal formula and is the only cold sore treatment that cuts healing time in.
The city grew quickly in the weeks that followed, and the first sharks drifted into town.
Oh, show us the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For we must find the next whiskey bar. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you. I tell you we must die. Oh, moon of Alabama, we now must say goodbye. We've
plenty for me. I got my gal, I got my song, I got heaven the whole day long. No use complaining. Got my gal, got my Lord, got my song. Listen up. It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in that Bible, they ain't necessarily so.
those are just some 20th century.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Oops,
you are
wait.
all very welcome to Riga Jurmala
Sorry,
Academy event.
Still getting the
As you all know,
tickets
today our
off.
guest is the distinguished singer, four-time.
There we go. All right. Oh, where'd everybody go? There you are. So any questions, any thoughts, we've got a bunch of messages here. Oh, a bunch of them are from Liz. So any thoughts, any questions? Like I said, we just touched the surface here. And I thank you for those who also added some of their knowledge. I think then is my next adult continuing ed, is that going to be about Jews and musical theater?
Yes, that is February, and I'm going to put a sign-up link to that in the chat as soon as I find it.
And that will also be another frustrating brief synopsis, because when you talk about, you know, when you think about, you know, Jews in opera, but there are some, but a good number, but when you talk about Jews in musical theater, it's like, whoa. You know, there are going to be a lot of people, and I'll try not to make it all about Sondheim. But, you know, you certainly, you know, we'll certainly have a lot of material to look at then. And I will share the, Hazan Leah, you have your hands raised?
On a very amusing note, when I sang my first Brunhilde in Walküre, the Wotan was Jewish and the Sieglinde. So we were 3 Yidden in this production, and the stage director said, hey, we ought to do a Borscht Belt ring, you know? And so we were goofing off, and after the break, we were sitting in the canteen goofing off, and after the break, it was the 3rd act, and it was when I tell Sieglinde that she's going to have the baby Siegfried, and I give her the broken sword pieces. And so I'm singing it, den ersten Helden der Welt hegst du, o Weib, im schirmenden Schoß, and I went, Mazel Tov. And then, of course, the Wotan had to get into the act shortly afterwards. And he's supposed to say, Schweig mir von dem Welsungen-Geschlecht. And he went, Hat mir nicht kein Schanik von der Welsungen-Mispoche. And we just lost it.
And then she said, what, you're giving me a broken sword?
Exactly.
What kind of gift is this? Then give it to me.
Wotan, the guy with a schmatta over his eye, as Jack Kessler says. But, you know, we have some, I think a little Jewish soul was having a lot of fun with a certain German composer. If you know the Nusach for the High Holiday Shachrit service, Baruch atah Adonai, ba 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 ba, and my little brain goes, oh yeah.
That's, yeah. The little Wagner in there.
Yep.
For a minute, of course, but well, thank you to everyone. This has been fun, and I will put together the playlist, and there's also a bunch of stuff that I didn't get to in the playlist. So a couple of clips from Tales of Hoffmann by Offenbach, you know, the Baccarol and the Doll Song, which are 2 of my favorite fun pieces. But so there's some other, and they said the Jewish Rigoletto, as I call it. So thank you, everybody. And
Rabbi, from everybody at Haskalah, and thank you everybody who joined us from all of us at Haskalah. We love doing these things that kind of educate and also explore how Jews and
Interact
know.
with the broader world.
Yeah, our broader world. That's the right answer. That's
Right.
how what I was trying to get at. But and we really appreciate being able to put these on for everybody now that COVID lets us feel a larger world. But please do help us out with that by checking out those links that Liz put in the chat.
All right. Thank you, everybody.